Saturdays. All music, all day. Reggae Hour. K-Fox Night.
You looking for the perfect beat? Yeah, it's the beat of the Fox.
Fresh Juice with D-Money in the group.
Myself, D-Money.
Pint Size Patron.
Taylor Hart.
Resistencia. The Northwest Rap Gang.
DJ Medina. Chad Cheddar.
Come on.
Northwest Rap Gang.
Sergio Lacour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go to the phone line. Tell them who we talking.
Sea Monster Radio. Mo Jams. It's your jam.
We're live. Welcome to Mo Jam Mondays. This is KZ of KZ Music Media. Caller Goddess for Mo Jam Mondays.
Just my opinion. God is inspiration all day and all night. Saturdays. Rainier Avenue Radio App.
How would COVID vaccines work in your body? Here are 3 things to know. Number 1, a vaccine is basically a training session for the immune system. Vaccines teach the immune system to look for the key features of a virus. So when a virus does show up, it's ready to fight it off. Number 2, a vaccine gives your body a plan to recognize the virus. Then your immune system starts preparing by making antibodies, or fighter cells, that stay in your blood as protection in case the virus tries to invade. What this means is you get immunity against the disease without having to get sick first. Number 3, when enough people's bodies know how to fight off a virus, it has nowhere to go. That slows the spread. When people get a vaccine, we're able to stop the spread quicker and get closer to ending the pandemic. To learn more, go to covidvaccinewa.org. A message from the state of Washington.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at Rainier Avenue Radio World.
Wash your hands, don't touch your face, wipe things down, clean up your space. When you cough and sneeze, do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
1, 2, get down. What's up, big and little homies? This is Masvita Maraire, host of Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world, your one-stop shop for Seattle sports. We cover preps, we cover college, we cover pro, we cover it all. Huskies, Mariners, Seahawks, Garfield, South, Roosevelt, Metro, King County. This is where you want to listen to for all the sports that's happening in Seattle. Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Turn it on. Good afternoon. Tuesday from the Columbia City Theater, Juan Cotto from Rainier Avenue Radio Station, our community radio station, your community radio station. And we are looking forward to another Tuesday afternoon with the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, Mr. Mick Hoffman. Mick, happy Tuesday.
Happy to see you. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you
today.
Yeah. Running around supporting great organizations. My friend Gina Hall had her first annual event for Uplift Northwest, the organization that's formerly known as the Millionaires Club, and they do a phenomenal job of serving the community, and just had a wonderful opportunity there. So Gina, give you a little shout out, a little plug. Thanks for a wonderful event. Got to spend 90 minutes with my wife today, which was unusual. And I caught up with Sarah, and she went running off her next appointment, and we've got to go pick up the kids. So, but let's talk about athletics in Washington State with the executive director, and let's talk tournaments. Let's talk about we fall sports is ending up. They're starting to come to the conclusion. We saw the football tournaments laid out, and saw some of the brackets for the 4A, the 3A, and the 2A. And Mick, how do we go ahead and lay out tournaments in the state of Washington? And let's just not all you football fans out there, let's just not hold on to football, but let's talk about golf and some of the other fall sports and how they kind of come to their year-end events.
Yeah, you bet. So the way we do it is we decide on the number of teams based on the number of schools in each classification, right? So that's how that's decided. That's all available in our handbook if people want details. WIAA.com, right? I'm learning to promote, but you go in there under resources handbook, it'll explain why some are 20, some are 16, some are 12 teams, some are 8. So it's a lot of people don't understand that. And then from there, the 9 WI districts around the state, they decide who their representatives are for the allocated spots. So each one gets so many based on the percent of schools they have. So it's all math, proportionality. And so then what we're doing in the meantime, like right now, we're actually getting ready not for next year, but for the 4 years after that. So we're already starting to develop what the tournament structures are going to be like. So we've talked a lot. This will probably be a big topic for us to chat about down the road here soon. Like, what does basketball look like after the next 2 years? So for this year and next year, you're going to see our tournament formats for the essentially in all sports be exactly the same as what we've had the previous 4 years. But what we're looking at is, do we change those formats? And the way we do that is we bring in coaches and administrators and students that are involved in those sports on committees to come in, discuss, do some work, run scenarios, what are outcomes, maybe unintended outcomes, and then as a committee make a recommendation to the board. And then the board decides ultimately what that tournament looks like. So it's a long drawn out process. It needs to be very thoughtful because it has a big impact. So
let's go from soup to nuts on this, because this is such an interesting topic. At times it's an emotional topic, and in regards to competitive nature on the field. But let's move aside from that. And I'm sorry for some of our audience, this may be redundant. I know we've talked about tournaments, but let's talk about tournaments from a whole new perspective in regards to the WIAA. When you look at a tournament, what is the experience that you want for the student?
No, I appreciate that question. I mean, what we want is this should be a positive memory-making experience. So ideally, coaches are doing that every single day, and schools are doing that every single day with their regular season. What we want to do is to have this be an event. Like, this is different than what you've done all year. Now, some of our schools do a phenomenal job and challenge us with that. But we want this, like, this is something a student or a fan attending or a parent attending, they should never forget this day. And there's a lot of stuff that come and go in our lives. So that's what we want to do and it shouldn't be based on winning or losing, because in every championship game, there's a loser walking out of there. We're going to run cross country this weekend. We're going to have hundreds of runners, and we're going to walk out of there with essentially 12 champions out of hundreds of runners. And so it can't just be based on winning. So what we want to do is emphasize the spirit of competition. And, I don't think I'm being Pollyanna in this world. Like, it's about the competition and getting better. Are you getting PRs in your cross country? We want to lift great stories, those teams the volleyball teams that all of a sudden figure it out in the last half of the season and make that postseason run. I mean, we had the school last year, Linden Christian up there, ranked 16th going into the tournament, play for the state championship. Now they're traditional powers. But for whatever reason, they struggled through the season. The seeding committee put them down, and they made this incredible run. And so we see that every once in a while. And so whether you're on an incredible run, or you just blow through the tournament, or you just show up and you do 2 and barbecue and have to hit the road, it should be memorable in some way. So that's the ultimate goal of what we do.
The other aspect of it as well is that not only you have the participants that this is a special experience for from the competitive aspect of the athletics, but there are also a lot of us in the community, especially football, my freshman, sophomore, and junior year. I was a big fan of my high school, and to be able to go to the event as a student to root for your team. What are the different things that are done and put in place to make sure that the students have a good experience with that as well?
Yeah, that's where we try to work with the schools. So if they can find a way to pull rooter buses together, right? So again, fortunately in the past 10 years and really in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot more intentionality on inclusiveness, right? And what does that mean? And so really what it means is everybody feeling invited, not just being invited, but feeling invited, and then removing barriers. And so those are things that we work with schools. So if schools come up with creative ideas, we can help get them in, get them out, trying to make sure they bring their bands, their dance teams, the cheer squads. So we try to find a way to mix all that in. So when you come to our events, a lot of times, we don't, you go to a Seattle Storm game and they have all this halftime entertainment, the lady who balances the teacups, like how does she do this? I've watched her probably 12 times. I still can't figure out how she does it on the unicycle. But we don't do that because we're highlighting our student performers, right? These students have supported and done that. And so getting fans in, our board has been really good about, even when we've had to do price increases, of trying to avoid student ticket prices, right? So yeah, there's a cost. Schools are really, really good about finding a way around that, but we want to include as many students in the experience beyond just the athletes.
The other area is connecting with alumni and people in the community that want to go to these type of events and creating a special experience also for the people whose schools might not be there at the tournament, but what are the different ways that we connect with the community to get the communities involved with these as well? Yeah,
and we have a very vibrant social media platform, and so that's one way we try to send a lot of messages. So if people are following us, we have an app that if you're a high school sports fan, this is really a must-have, and it's WIAA Live, and it's all our tournament information, every bracket. And if the WI districts, if the Metro League is running the tournament and we've asked for brackets, we'll put them on there. So you have one place to go to. And for us, you might click on that and go to somebody else's website. We don't care. That's not what it's about. It's about getting our product to the market so people can, if we want more people to be engaged, they got to know where to find it. My first year in this job back in the fall of 19, I'm driving across the state trying to meet people. And I'm driving back on a Thursday night, and I either trying to pick up a volleyball match or a girls' soccer game. And I can't find a schedule unless I know the secret sauce of whatever website that league or district used. And there wasn't a rhyme or reason to it. So we said, hey, if we want fans to come, they got to be able to find us. And we can't just rely on every single school because marketing is not a focus, right, with the way we're structured in schools. So now we have this app where we have every sport, every schedule on there. And then scores are updated in real time. So the officials put the scores in right after the game, and you got it. And then our website has league standings. And if a league has a vibrant website, good, click on us and go to them. That's okay. Sure, you sell your advertising, we'll sell ours. There's a business side to this. We're not trying to protect this all. We're trying to share it all. And we can all find a way to support the programming if we share it. So make the pie bigger rather than fighting over slices of pie. So, I'm a school teacher by trade, so maybe I'm not a good businessman. I don't know, but it seems to be working because people are finding it, and we're getting good feedback that people are able to get to games that they want to find.
What's the name of this app again?
It's WIAA Live.
WIAA Live.
Free app, and we don't spam it. So you get on there, and it has a ton of tournament information. So, and
that's on Apple and Google Play.
Yeah. Yeah, don't call me. I'm not. I believe so. Where's all my Apple phone? But my understanding is yes, it coordinates and integrates with everybody. So.
Oh my goodness, this is Mick Hoffman, and he says he's not a better school teacher than a businessman, but half of the selling a product is letting people know that it's out there. So kudos for you on this app. Mick is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I am Juan Cotto from Rainier Avenue Radio, and this is WIAA Primetime, our Tuesday conversation about athletics and activities with the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. Mick, I went to the state championship games in the state of Texas for high school football.
Yeah.
And they have a very, very, very elaborate halftime. Both bands play for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's one of the coolest special things in the community.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why I believe that, they talk about filling up Jerry's World for a high school football game. 55,000 people are there. But I would probably guess that a quarter of them to a third of them are there for the bands as well. It's the band parents. It's part of a very special community they have down in Texas, of course. And I'm wondering, and you touched on it a little bit. I know in the WIAA championships, especially for football, and I think it's one of the most unique things that I've ever seen is that the cheerleaders are also introduced. Mm-hmm. And the young women and men who do the cheer squads, who put in so much time, as you know, practicing and working and that cheer and cheer squads that do, and it's wonderful that that's recognized. And I'm wondering, in regards to the recognition of others outside of the athletes themselves, the cheer and the bands, how do we allow them to have a special experience in some of these tournaments?
Yeah, that's one of the things we're talking about with football specifically this year. Is traditionally we brought everybody out, and then we have about a 20-minute process where every student gets their name read, right, over the speaker. And people, they like that. But also, what's that do to the environment of the game, right? Basically stops. Right. Kids have warmed up. Now they're cold. Now they go back out. So we're talking about changing that some and reading their names still, but not necessarily, one at a time, have them step out. So it'll be interesting what kind of feedback we get from participants on that, right? Mm-hmm. And then also from the fans in general and the players. And so those are, but as far as the bands, that's actually a concept we've thrown around, is as we grow this experience, a battle of the bands. And so we've been talking about that for a few years. Part of the trick is for the schools to get their bands there's a pretty significant cost, so they got to want to do it. And then can we do it as a competition, which you then need to fold into this whole statewide Northwest process of the band competition, because that's a well-established. So when it'd be like somebody coming in throwing a basketball tournament in the middle of the season where teams have already set their schedules and have their maximum games. So it's a little bit trickier than just great ideas. We have a wealth of great ideas, and we're always willing to take more. I get a lot of unsolicited ideas. They're not always great, but we listen to them just because there's something in there that, somebody may have thought of that is smarter than us, and we're willing to listen to all of it. So those are things we're trying to do, because like I've said before, we have about, by the time you count our dual sport athletes, about 200,000 students that participate a year, right? If they do a couple sports, 140 unique. One of my goals is to get 300,000, because we know the value of the product of education-based, working with good, healthy adults in school settings. And so we want to get more students involved. So it's like, how do we do that? And those are opportunities. That doesn't mean they have to be more football players. The other thing about Jerry's World, I went down there to state football championships to observe. I was down there for a meeting, and they rent that place.
Yep.
And my understanding is it's over $1 million to rent it. That's at 20% of our budget. But the game I watched was a school which would be equivalent to about our 2Bs here. So that 200 kind of 150 student count school. And they had more fans at that one game than we have for all 6 of our games. At about 20,000, we get about 16,000 fans, paid fans at least, at ours. They had 20,000 at this one game. And that one, they didn't happen to have the bands, because I would have loved to have seen that. But just there, because football in Texas and all that. And so they bring in over $3 million in revenue, right? And so they're making a ton of money off of this. We are making a little bit off of football, which helps fund the other ones. So we have to find ways to, not blow out the budget, but also put butts in the seats. Like, we want people there. For a student playing with a loud crowd, that's the experience, right? That's what triggers memories. And so our goal is to do that. So, we'd love to have that problem of too many people and have to up our crowd control. That'd be a good day for us.
We'll come back to that in a second, but another problem you have, I'm sure, and you guys have to deal with at the WIAA, is, I live in Pullman or I live in Spokane, and that state championship game is over there in Seattle, and they expect me to go all the way over there. And then, of course, when we had the state baseball championships at Gisa Stadium and spoiled West Siders like me, I've got to drive all the way to the Tri-Cities. Yeah. How do we come up with equitable ways to make sure that these tournaments are in either half of the state or either quarter of the state, and making sure that we're allowing for championships that people can attend?
Yeah, so if we have friends on the east side listening, we know you're there, right? And here's a surprising fact. 64% of our state championships are on the east side of the mountains. Wow. I'm gonna repeat that. 64% are on the east side of the mountains. And people say, well, yeah, it's the smaller non-revenue sports. Well, 2 of those are basketball, right? And the most fans we get is basketball. We get more for basketball than we do for football, quite a bit more, right? So we get about 80,000 total for the 2 basketball tournaments, and we get about 16,000 for football. But I also understand, football's driving. So one of the things our board has agreed to, that our staff proposed, is if we have 2 east side schools that are lined up to play in the state championship in football, and the weather is going to be, we're not going to be in a blizzard or a heavy snow or ice on the east side, we will move tournaments closer to them. Because again, we want them to play in front of their friends and families and their communities. So if we can help with that, great. If we got to split it, the reason, that traditionally it was in the Tacoma Dome. And then when we moved out of the Tacoma Dome, we wanted to keep it in close proximity. So if you wanted to go to the 1B game and then the 2B game, because we have some longtime football fans, had the same seats in that Tacoma Dome. They never moved. They watched 2 days of football, 6 games. So if people wanted to bounce around, we needed to have them close enough. So we found 3 good stadiums within 15, 20-minute drive in Tacoma. That's pretty impressive. And so, but what we found the first year in tracking, very few fans went from stadium to stadium. And then last year, even less went from stadium to stadium. And a lot of them don't even stay for 2 games, right? They come support their team and they're out. There's that few hardcore football fans that'll watch both. But for the most part, they watch their team and they leave. We have a different fan than we had 20 years ago. So we're trying to cultivate that community person who just loves the sport and wants to sit and watch volleyball all day long in the Yakima Sundome, right? But so that's possible. But what we're seeing is that's not the norm anymore. People follow their team, they come and they go. So that's how we try to take care of our east side folks, that if we have that, we'll do it. Why is baseball over there? Well, it rains a lot on the side of the mountains, and so it's safer in the spring. So we try to be thoughtful. At the same time, we have to have locations that want to host us. Because 1, we have to make it financially feasible. Right. Number 2 is it takes a lot of volunteers, and that's something we can get into more if you want later.
Absolutely.
But,
we'll touch on that.
The level of volunteers is pretty, people have no idea how many people come out and just give their time or take on some leadership responsibility for a very small stipend. I mean, they're volunteers. So.
Let's go back to another important part of the sport, and that's the officials. Is this a reward, or are the tournaments a reward for officials who have performed well during the year? And what are the processes involved that allow us to select the officials?
Yeah, no, that's great. So it's their state tournament as well. So every association, right, they get allocations as well through WOA. So a lot of people don't realize this, but the Washington Officials Association is a separate organization from us. So we're very close. Todd Stortle, their executive director, we rent them space in our building. I mean, we communicate on a regular basis, but they get those allocations and they decide how to fill them, similar to how our districts decide. I mean, in this area, the Metro League could just pick a team and send them. They don't have to have a league tournament or any of that. They could just decide. Those rules are up to them to set. We take them from there and seed them and play. And so that's how they do it. Part of it, to try to continue to professionalize the WOA, they have a process in there of they have to go through what they call their RTO program. So they have to be observed and they have to get certain criteria, meet certain criteria grades to qualify for those allocations. So if they're willing to go through that, so they have observers throughout the year, a lot of time unbeknownst to the officials. So, right, you just catch them doing their best, right? And then they get recognized for that, they become available, and then their association decides how to fill those spots. what's been great with Todd Stortle's leadership and then with support from us is we've really pushed them not to just, you hear about the good old boy thing in everything, right? Every organization, especially in sports, the good old boy network. Well, we're really saying, hey, in female sports, if you have viable female officials, let's give her a chance. You're like, and if we have up and coming people of color that are deserving, right? Just because they maybe are 30 years old and they haven't been there for 30 years, but if they're good enough, let's give them, we want our officials to represent our players, right? It needs to be a reflection of who's on the floor. So Todd's done a really good job of working with their boards, and they've taken that to heart, and we're seeing that at our events. So if you get out to state events, you should see more and more of that, and it's continuing to grow. So we had a female do a state championship football last year, right? And what's cool is she got to do it with her dad. Like, how cool is that? And she was very deserving. That was not a gift. It was not because she's female. It was because she is a deserving official, and she was good. And you watch her work, and it's like, and she's a little tiny, athletic young lady, and she was very good. And the feedback she got from the coaches and the players was outstanding. So that's what we want. They're not gimmies. We just have to be fair and provide the opportunity. And if people who haven't necessarily been doing it for a long time, that's how we create enthusiasm and retain. Now everybody knows that you truly have a chance in it. No different than young players entering a football program.
And you and I've had so many conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it just seems to me something so simple, really, it almost attracts people to wanting to be an official.
Yeah. If you see somebody, this is what I'm hearing, right? And because, how I present, if you see somebody that looks like you, that you can relate to, either their history or their life experiences, and they're doing something, it seems a lot more plausible that you can do it, right? Like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And so, what we want to do is have our young people see people who look like them and say, hey, that's something I could do, because otherwise they may not even consider that, and we miss out on an incredible opportunity of keeping our athletes involved at post graduation. And so, it's like a no-brainer when you sit back and think of it. So why? Well, that's our job, is to jar the system and get people thinking that way. That's why we even when I'm receiving criticism, right, or people who know better than us.
You don't receive criticism, do you? No way.
What are you talking about, at home or all deserved? No, but when we're getting that, what we really work hard to do is not personalize it and let the emotion of it dictate our response, but really to take a look at it and find out what's motivating this response. And a lot of times there's a lot of truth to what people are saying, even if we don't want to hear it. And so we have to be open to that and then say, okay, what do we do about it? And the people who are really serious and interested in changing things, they'll engage with us and help become part of the solution. And that's when it really works, right? And so, so this is one where, Todd and his team came forward with this, and we're like, yeah, what can we do to help you? And so I appreciate that they're that intentional in this work.
He is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I am your host, Juan Cotto, on our community radio station, your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And trust me, if you have ideas for the WIAA, take notes and send them to them, because they actually will get listened to. And we know there's a lot of people who are so active here on Rainier Avenue Radio. So take them up on that. If you have ideas for sports tournaments or different ideas that would impact the WIAA, I think Mick's saying, hey, we'd love to hear them. Well, maybe not just jump on them, but we certainly will listen to them. And if they're good ones, we'll probably put them in play. And that's a cool thing. Mick, the financial aspect of a tournament, and you touched on it in Texas, and you and I believe we touched on this earlier in the year with a couple of special events that were held in Seattle. Are we coming up on break time? Is it break time now? Okay, we will come back to this. We will come back to conversations with Mick in regards to the tournament and also the transition from fall sports to winter sports on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not hearing men compare women to residential real estate, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Hey, Seattle, Shop the Beat is back. Shop the Beat supports the economic recovery of small businesses, local musicians, and neighborhoods throughout Seattle. This program matches small retail businesses with local musicians to host free in-store performances during peak shopping hours to help increase foot traffic and sales for retailers and provide competitive pay for musicians who were significantly impacted by the pandemic. The City of Seattle Office of Economic Development is currently accepting applications from musicians and small businesses who are interested in participating. Apply for Shop the Beat at seattle.gov/economic development. Applications end December 1st.
What's on your heart? Are you exhausted at the lack of progress for people of color in business, politics, and life? This is Cindy Bright, the host of Heartbeat Radio. Each week, we explore this heart condition in the country that is affecting you and me. We have real conversations about what's necessary for change. It's time to change this dialogue. Will you join this Heartbeat Weekly, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on Rainier Avenue Radio?
Mga kaibigan, ito po si Kuya Bert Kawili.
And this is Miles Salvador from Australia.
And I'm Norb Kawili, also known as Norbcam.
Kung gusto niyo po ang latest news and events from the Philippines at yung local Filipino community, PhilAm Radio po.
We play Filipino music and interview guests from all around the world.
And I'll keep you updated on the latest Seahawks and sports news.
Kaya always tune in, PhilAm Radio every Tuesday, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
And in YouTube and Facebook. Salamat po.
Hello, my name is Pastor Derek Lane, and I live and pastor here in the Othello community. I'm vaccinated because I know how illness can hurt the community. As a grandfather, I am boosted to help protect my 3.5-year-old granddaughter who can't be. I don't want to see members of my community die needlessly. And as a pastor, I've had funerals for those who caught COVID, but none from taking the vaccine. If you have questions, need resources, or want to make an appointment, visit kingcounty.gov/vaccine.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world is your 24/7 digital media hub. Tune in at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TuneIn apps.
That's what we got, Justin. Individual sports and all the with ejections and rules violations.
Good afternoon and welcome back to WIAA Primetime Weekly, the conversation that we have with Mick Hoffman, the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. This is Mr. Hoffman right here. I am Juan Cotto, playing with my earpiece, right here at the historic Columbia City Theater. And we at Rainier Avenue Radio, we are looking forward to an incredible month of November. You have seen our debates. First of all, number one, I want to encourage everybody to vote. And I wrote a nice little article. Maybe I'll share that on Rainier Avenue Radio in regards to voting and making sure that people get their ballots turned in. One of my coworkers, she waits to the last second. She'll vote on November the 8th, next Tuesday. And she will take her kids with her, and then they will go out after work, and they'll drop the ballot off at the ballot drop box so people can see her voting. And she wants her kids to kind of feel that electricity that we used to have when we used to vote that way. I don't do it that way. I get it. I vote as soon as I receive the ballot, Mick. I pull it out of the mail. I get my ballot. I know who I'm voting for. Go through the go through the county pamphlet just a little bit to familiarize myself with the initiatives, but I get that sucker, I fill in the dots, throw it in the envelope, and I get it out of the house because I'm afraid I'll lose it. I'll put it behind some papers. I'll say, oh, I'll figure that out later. And that ballot will end up missing. And you want to have the opportunity to participate in your community process. And if you don't participate, you really lose your voice in the community. It's such an important thing. It's something that I think in the United States, so many of us take for granted. And I'm hoping that the conversation about voting and your preference, you vote for the candidates that you feel that are important, but please take the time to learn a little bit about the issues through the voters pamphlet, and then you go ahead and put that ballot in, and you have 7 days to do that. So next week is the election, and obviously you'll hear more about that on Rainier Avenue Radio. And I know there's a number of brilliant people who will be talking about these issues that are coming up. I believe we also have some opportunities. The Earshot Jazz Festival and Tony Benton's incredible relationship with Earshot Jazz, and what a program that is in our community. And I believe there's a concert coming up. I can't see it. I'm a little bit too far away from it to read it from where I'm sitting, but nevertheless, you can see it on the screen. Please, the opportunity to hear jazz in our community. Seattle is a jazz city, and it's a vibrant community for music. And the Earshot Jazz Festival, in relation with the wonderful work that we do here at Rainier Avenue Radio. If you like music, this is a radio station you have to listen to. You can hear from all over the world. Mick, the transition, we're going from fall sports to winter sports. We're going from, and when you and I first started this endeavor in early September, the sun was coming through the windows. It was probably about 80 degrees in here. It is noticeably cooler. And I teased my wife this morning. I think I picked the wrong day to shave my head, get the fresh bald head going. I can definitely feel the cool of November on the top of my dome there. We start to go from the fall sports and the outdoor sports to the indoor sports. We start to go from wrestling to go to wrestling, and we start to go to basketball, and we for both sexes, which is such a huge sport, like you said, the most attendance sport in the state of Washington. And let's talk a little bit about that just in terms of the transition, and let's discuss it from this perspective, because I think we've touched on some of these things before, but the athletes who are participating in some of the fall sports, what can we do to make sure that they're engaged through that winter phase? I mean, basketball only needs about 10, 15 kids. Football had about 80 out there. You've got wrestling, and then you've got a couple of other activities and so forth. What can we do to make sure that the kids who are participating in the fall don't lose their momentum and their energy going into the winter?
No, that is an issue. Winter is by far our lowest participation season because we're limited indoors, and a lot of them are cut sports. So wrestling's one that a lot of anybody can get out there and do that. You may or may not get a match. So it is a tremendous challenge for us. I know a lot of our schools are really good about offering intramurals or open gyms. So especially for some of the spring athletes gearing up for that, whether it's catching and throwing a ball or working out. And so I would say that's probably the biggest thing is using the facilities. A lot of our schools have some pretty phenomenal weight rooms and fitness machines, and a lot of companies have come forward and donated in various communities to give access to folks. So that's really where it needs to happen, and schools understand that. That's the beauty about education-based sports is the adults in the schools understand, hey, if we don't keep Mick involved this winter because he just got done with volleyball and we need him for track, we need him to have his grades, they need to keep me plugged in somehow. And so because that's at the forefront of education based, that's one of the differences between club and education. There's different requirements depending on the club, but so they're very intentional in doing that work. So, but it's not, if you allow it just to happen, it's not going to happen for a majority of students.
Let's talk about the participation in some of these other club sports that are ancillary to the school-based sports. I know there's been a proliferation of 7-on-7 teams recently, and I know that at these schools, some of them at times have been affiliated with the schools, but a lot of them are for profit. They cost a considerable amount of money to play on, and they take kids from all over the community, and they go on travel trips and so forth. And a lot of the colleges have exacerbated some of the coaches' frustrations, right? Because they're offering kids off of the 7-on-7 teams. And that, I mean, you know, certainly we don't want to limit our options for our kids, but at the same time, you know, it used to be that the football coach was the one that the coaches would come and talk to. And the academic performance of that student and the behavior of that student was something that the high school coach could relate to that coach. Now they're talking to the 7-on-7 coaches, and it's a completely different thing. And I'm just wondering, what are the, you know, are there rules involved with some of these ancillary sports, and how is the WIAA handling that conversation?
Yeah, the challenge with the out of season sports like that is a football coach. So say Garfield, their coaches can't coach their kids football on football specific in the spring out of season. So once December 3rd, we have those state football championships. They can't work directly on football related items under our current rules. We had an amendment that we brought forward 3 years ago, 2019, for 7-on-7 to become its own distinct sport in the spring. And that would allow coaches to coach it. So your football coach could coach in the spring. And there was some concern from football coaches at the time that, hey, I coach all spring or all fall. I give up most of August. I coach all, you know, up until December. And I'm going to have to coach again in the spring. And we said, well, you don't have to. Like, we saw it as an opportunity because 7-on-7, you're not dealing with the tackling and some of the more technical safety risks. Like, this would be a great chance for a young up and coming coach to be a head coach. Like, let's start prepping and grooming. We talked about, we have a lot of unprepared head coaches. This would be a great opportunity to do it. So no, you don't have to do all the work. And we got some resistance to that from coaches because football coaches by trade. I coached some football. I wasn't a head football coach, but you control freaks, right?
Not only that, coach, I'm thinking what you just said about the young coaches. They would probably not want to be a head coach anymore after coaching 7-on-7 like that.
True. So, you know, that was one that we saw, but at the same time, they want to be able to control that environment. So either we got to put in the work to control it. We can't just complain about it, because there are a lot of good things happening in 7-on-7 for opportunities for students. They're keeping them active. You got good adults working in there. Now there's some that are running tournaments, you know, and they're jumping fences. There's no insurance. Kid gets hurt or worse. What kind of screening are they doing of their coaches? You know, our coaches, at least the coaches schools are hiring and authorizing, have been background checked and all those things. Like, there's a lot of those kinds of things that people don't think about until there's a problem. So that's the concern, is without direct oversight, you're just reliant on the individuals who own or operate those non-school sports as opposed to school sports. And again, there's problems in school sports. We read about them every once in a while, but for the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of students, there's very few of those kind of issues. So that's really what's going on with football in general. So it's really more of a philosophical one. Some states have put in, you can work with 2 or 3 players, you know, 2 or 3 times. Baseball coaches can get kids thrown through the winter. We'll have a majority of our volleyball girls who are finishing up their fall season. The club volleyball, USA Volleyball, works very cooperatively with state associations. They want it to work for their students, right? So they don't see it as a competition. And so the weekend after volleyball ends, they have their tryouts. Girls get put on their teams and they play all winter, and then they're done and they go. So where's the competition with schools? Some of the high-level club volleyball, they can't play basketball because they're just time commitments. So that's one. But again, it's the student's choice. So that's with competing times. And then the only other thing I'd say, going back to football, which was always the last sport the high school coach was the direct contact for recruiting. You know, some people say, well, yeah, it's 7-on-7 because I get 6 kids D1, I promote it, builds my business, right? True. Same time, if you have 6 kids coming out of your high school, if Garfield has 6 kids coming out D1 there, it builds their program, right? Because we know even if coaches aren't recruiting, successful programs recruit kids, right? 8th graders get to choose where to go, and they're, 8th graders are influenced by wins and losses. And so that transcends school and club sports. That's why I always say I don't see club sports as a competition or a problem. I think there's a way we work together. But I would always say, because of the governance and oversight of schools and the WIAA, it's a much safer and player-friendly environment and education-based because of the requirements in there. It's just different. But it doesn't necessarily make it better depending on your desired outcome. So.
The And I want to say, I was going to say the influx or the proliferation, it's the wrong adjective. The AAU basketball has been almost a staple now for decades, in regards to how it kind of bumps up right against the high school basketball season, or however it is structured now. And it seems like the 7-on-7 model was trying to kind of copy itself after the AAU model, and so many kids are playing AAU basketball. Do the other coaches in some of the other sports, for example, you bring this 7-on-7 to spring football. Do the track coaches get up and say, "Hey, wait a minute, our sport over here is still pretty important. We want to be competitive." And how does that work in regards to that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenges we've had is to try to implement new sports, is that where the student's going to come from. So girls flag football is one we're looking at right now. Tacoma School District and Franklin Pierce School District have had it for a couple of years, and then Seattle School started last year. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we've asked them to do is that as they're implementing this is to ask those young ladies, what other sports do you already play? And if we're trying to determine how many play fall, winter, or spring. And ideally it'd go in a winter season, right? We play flag football outdoors. Now, wouldn't be very fun in January, right? So there's probably not a real viable option. Mm-hmm. Definitely doesn't work on the east side. So then we're looking at fall or spring. So we're trying to decide how many new athletes are we getting? How many athletes are already playing that we're just moving them from one sport to another? Or how many do we have now, but if it went to that season, we'd lose. So because that's a very real concern that you brought up within the schools. Sometimes I think it's out of paranoia. And again, if we can keep our students connected to education based, we know the environment they get. They have background and trained coaches. They have safe vehicles that are transporting them in, right? There's all these safeguards put in there. They have certified officials. There's strict rules. I mean, we were in an AAU tournament, and again, I really want to be fair because I have a lot of respect for people running some of these clubs. I mean, they do a really good job. AAU basketball in itself is not the problem, right? AAU basketball in some communities, that's the only middle school option available to everybody. So it's not just for the elite. That is the youth program. Central Washington, Yakima Valley. Like AAU basketball is what students play because there's not a lot of other options there. It's accessible to everybody for the most part. We hear, but my experience with AAU basketball when my son was going through was these tournaments where coaches were just acting a fool. I mean, just like literally they eject the coach for cussing at the official, screaming in front of the kids, cussing and swearing. They don't throw the coach out of the gym like we would. They put the coach in the stands where he gets the fans riled up. They bring him back to the bench because they can't control him over there. Now he's okay. Now it's okay to act like that on the bench in front of there. And at the end of the game, they literally formed a gauntlet of about 12 officials. And as soon as the game ended, the officials ran down the gauntlet and they closed ranks to physically restrain and block the coaches from going after the officials. This is in a summer league tournament. And I asked the organizer, why are you doing this at this facility that hosts a bunch of these? And he said, look, if I kick them out, their 5 teams they bring for the other levels don't come. And if they don't come, the team they just beat for the championship, they don't bring their 7 teams. And if I don't have them there, all these college coaches aren't paying to come in. And these other teams don't come. And my tournament's over. So the driver of it is the finances. And so when we get to that point, that's when it becomes a problem. Up to that point, awesome. It's phenomenal. So, we get the funding from our ticket sales because we get a lot of people come to our games. They don't get so much, right? And so we also have schools that pay a membership fee and we go sell advertising. They do all that kind of stuff. So, so that's why I don't think it's bad. I just think it's bad when you allow that stuff. And we have some schools that don't do a good job managing their stuff, but they're responsible to us and their leagues. And there's a way to address that. And in some settings it isn't. So that's why I'm always really careful and talk a lot on this to say I don't think club sports are the problem because the opportunity those kids are getting to travel and do all that and play, those middle school students and elementary students in the Yakima Valley, it's awesome. That's what they need. They're filling a need. So it's just when money becomes the sole driver, that's when we start having issues.
He is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities. A lot of people want to say Athletics Association. It is the Activities Association, and they are located, their headquarters is down in Renton, and I believe that Mick still drives up and down the freeway every weekend, going down to his home in Vancouver and then coming up to work in Renton at the headquarters. I am Juan Cotto, and I am probably familiar to you on your community radio station, our community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And we do this every Tuesday. We have a conversation about athletics. We have a conversation about activities. We have a conversation about life and sports and coaches and how that impacts all of us at the high school level, because it's such a community builder and something that we take very seriously and cover at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. You brought up a couple of different things, and hopefully I'm going to be able to touch on some of these points before we get out. First of all, I like what you said. I want to congratulate Deontay Cooper, who is the head coach at Highline High School. They had a spectacular year, won their league championship for the second consecutive year at the 2A level. I'm a Highline Pirate forever, so congratulations to the Pirates. Hopefully I'm going to get a chance to get out there and see Coach Cooper and the staff that he's built, and how proud that we are of them as former Highline Pirates, and we're looking forward to their participation in the state championship this year. But as we think about it, when I was at Highline, it was a completely different building, and we were playing a 3A schedule, and we were getting flattened. I mean, we got beat pretty good, and to hold a team together, let alone try to put a couple victories together in a season, was always a challenge. And as you said, and that struck a chord with me in regards to the recruiting, because I've always felt that way. What goes on in the building and what goes on the field is what the kids are motivated to participate by. And if the teams are getting beat up a little bit, it's the kids aren't motivated to go out. And as you said, I think sometimes that, and we talk about recruiting as we have these in the conversation of having coaches or having boosters going out and to 8th grade schools and offering kids shoes and envelopes to come to the school. I think a lot of it is like what you said. The kids are motivated to play for a good program that is successful on the field.
Yeah, I totally agree. I get the opportunity. I love being able to go out to school. So, I'm a school guy, and so I don't get to interact with students a lot. And really, their opinion is more important than anything else. And so yesterday, I had the opportunity to go to a charter school here that invited me out, small school for boys in Seattle, and spend a couple hours with them. And so chatting with some of the kids. And some of them, there were 7th and 8th graders, and I was getting introduced to them, and I was asking, hey, what are you going to do for high school? What sports do you play? What activities are you involved in? What do you like to do? And one kid, he didn't play any sports. His deal was designing clothes. So he told me how he got into it and why he liked it. And he was in Cliff Avrill's program and what that's doing for him.
Yep.
And a couple other students. And one young man, he said, well, I'm a basketball player. And the head of school there was like, yeah, he's really good. And I said, where are you going to go to school? And he shared a couple names with me that he's thinking about, because as 8th graders, they can choose what school they want to go to, right? So we're trying to give some flexibility without just having chaos in the system. And he was talking about, all he talked about was, I know this one program is really good right now, but this other program, I know a lot of kids go in there and they're really good kids. And the coach is really helping them. And no one had talked, none of his conversation, usually a 13, 14-year-old young man, when you get him excited talking about something, something comes out that it's going to never anything along recruiting. It's just he was evaluating these programs strictly based on, one, their current success, and then trying to figure out, is it going to be sustainable? And he was basing that on who are the coaches there and what the school's like. Can these two programs sustain it? It was really interesting to listen to it, because it really helped solidify the belief that, sure, we know there's some recruiting, and there's a lot of people who believe all this stuff's going on, and we just say, well, we just need evidence. We have a system in place where a school can say, hey, I think you're recruiting, and now you have to answer back to us, and if somebody wants us to come in and investigate, we can. So there's a process to address it. It's something that's hard to prove. Are we naive to think it doesn't happen? Sure, we know it happens, but we believe most of that is most likely happening student to student, or parents who love the program their child's in and they want them there. Because think about that. If I'm a parent and I'm recruiting your son to come play on the same basketball team as mine, if your son is better he's going to take the spot of somebody, which could be my son, right? It's like there's a job you want to go apply for. I remember in a careers class about 7th grade, they said, hey, when you go to apply for a job, think about telling all your friends you're applying, because if they all go apply, now you got more competition, right? So that's why we have transfer rules, is we don't want Highline every single year getting crushed, right? When they have the talent and the right coaches, they should have a chance for success. And when they don't, they don't. But there should be a fair opportunity to experience that. And in recruiting, what people forget about when students transfer is when they transfer into a school, they're taking somebody's spot. Right. Somebody else would have had that spot. Now, they're leaving a spot potentially, but they're taking somebody's spot. And what if that student's been there going to the hoop camp since 2nd grade and has been waiting for their opportunity as a senior, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and bumps them out? That's not fair. You can tell me that's life. That is life, but it's not fair, and it shouldn't happen to a student just because somebody didn't want to follow the rules. So that's what our job is, and if at some point the membership wants to change, that's a membership rule. This amendment process we talked about, those rules can change. They can tell us we want to allow all transfers all the time. We don't have to do anymore. Heck of a lot of work for me, right? Because I'm the guy that's make the decision at the end, and that part sucks. And so the programs, people are going to want to go to programs that they believe in, that they think their students or their own children, their most precious commodity, are going to be taken care of. And some want to go just because they think they have a better chance to win. And that doesn't always work out.
In the WIAA, and you brought up something that you went and visited a charter school. How do the charter schools kind of weave themselves into to this environment where you have parochial and private schools? You have public schools. Where do the charter schools kind of slide in?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're private, sometimes they're public. So, they're either. And so, in the state of Washington's unique. We say, we'll take you all, right? Yeah. And so you sign up as a member. When you sign up as a member, you're obligated to our rules. So as long as they're willing to follow our rules, it doesn't matter, right? And then we have that whole classification system. And you talk about Highline. I'm so proud of our membership. We made some accommodations for socioeconomic and other factors that data supports. And we're starting to see, where teams are being placed where they can compete, maybe not win the league championships. I mean, Highline's a great story, but they're at least not getting running clocked every game. Right. They might win. They might go 2-7 rather than 0-9 and never playing with a stop clock in the 4th quarter. So those are the things that we're trying to do, because we're taking care of 419 high schools. And so we understand there's going to be winners and losers, but everybody should have a chance for a fair fight when they go out there. So
as we're coming towards the end of the program, I want to bump into just one more thing that you talked about earlier, and we touched on it, and we were about to go into it before we went to break, and that is, I think the misnotion that everyone thinks that the tournaments just bring in this inordinate amount of money. Mick Hoffman's lining his pockets, and so in the final minute, just let's discuss that. I mean, you discussed the statistics from Texas. It's a different ballgame up here in Washington State, and what are you doing to make it a little bit more attractive financially so we can continue to bring these things?
Yeah, we're trying to be really creative with our sponsors, so that's number one. So we're trying to add sponsors, but also sponsors pay for presence. So if you oversaturate it, right, you lose it. So that is one thing that we're trying to do. The streaming of our games is another one. So we're trying to find alternative revenue sources, and then we're also going in and we're negotiating really hard on contracts and trying to, we're working with the mayors of some of these cities. We're working with the city councils in these cities to say, hey, we bring, Spokane told us last year, we brought $4.2 million of economic impact for the B state tournament. $4.2 million for restaurants, hotels, and shopping in that community. So why are we paying the expenses for the community to do that? Now, Yakima recognized that. We bring in almost $17 million over the course of the year to Yakima of economic positive impact. So they help us with our costs. So we're saying, hey, Tacoma, can we do that? Right? Mayor Woodard, she's told me, let's go to coffee and have a conversation. Up there, the Spokane Arena saying, yeah, let's have a conversation. So we're saying, hey, this is what we do for your communities. What can you do for us? Because then we don't have to raise ticket prices, right? We can expand tournaments rather than shrink them. We can put them in venues that students want to be in and create those memories. So we're trying to create new revenue streams. We're trying to save where we can, not at the cost of that memory-making experience we started talking about at the beginning of the show.
He's Mick Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I'm Juan, Cotto, Rainier Avenue Radio, our community radio station, your community radio station. See you next week.